I don't believe it was Mayor Baldwin's fault that she doesn't even put that vape pen away. And I don't think it was Deck Brown's fault, but they are accountable in part. The police did violate them. I yield my time.
Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate you joining us tonight. Is Lindsay Smith with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Your minute starts now.
Thank you. I would like to speak to City Council about the very basic request that I have for policies to be online. I find it very appalling that police policies are not readily available for citizens. All other laws and policies are readily available for others online. But however, when I seek to figure out what policies are in place for police officers, I'm not able to find that readily online. I also would love to see some sort of tracking for police infractions so that they would be able to have earlier intervention of officers who may have problems so that training could be put in place for those officers. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Next, we have Andrew Hicks.
Hey.
Hi, Andrew. You're with us, and your minute starts now.
Okay, first, 5 demands in solidarity with Raleigh Demands Justice. First, remove Chief Deck Brown if these policies are not implemented. Second, strengthen the Community Oversight Board with subpoena power. Third, end over-policing by building 0 new police stations and transferring stations crammed into Black communities. Fourth, require officers to intervene when other cops are abusive. And last, divert funding for police into community-led health and safety strategies instead. Next, your curfew doesn't close businesses, but it also doesn't exempt workers. So now they have to risk their jobs or risk arbitrary arrest by any cop that feels like it. Drop it now. Finally, the 8 can't wait reforms are weak. They're the bare minimum, and we must demand more. Even though Raleigh currently implements 5 of them, last weekend cops used expired CS gas on crowds, including children, students, reporters, and the elderly, and then capped that off by firing on a local queer bar for daring to provide water and first aid. Kneeling with protesters doesn't even start to excuse this. It's pathetic. These officers must be held accountable. Those who stood by should be ashamed. A good cop would not have complied with those orders. A good cop would have quit, but as far as I know, no one did.
Thank you, Andrew, for joining us tonight. Next, we have Emery Harwell.
All right. I'm here in support of Raleigh Pact. I want to start by saying Black Lives Matter. I'm going to also reiterate the demands of Raleigh Pact. We demand the removal of Chief Deck Brown if the policies are not met immediately. We demand subpoena power for the proposed oversight board to strengthen their ability to effectively review and investigate grievances. We propose that no new police stations are built in heavily Black areas and that the other multiple stations close to each other in heavily Black neighborhoods in Raleigh are transferred to reduce the over-policing of Black communities. We demand a policy requiring officers to intervene when one of their little picky comrades becomes overly abusive to detainees. We demand an investment in community-led health and safety strategies instead of increasing investment in police. We are on the streets not just for George Floyd, but for Akil, Sohail, and Kyron, and countless other victims of Raleigh police. We will not stop fighting for Black lives until we win. We're not impressed by your shows of solidarity, and we see right through them. The same officers who are kneeling are the same officers stealing medical supplies, gassing, and shooting at peaceful protesters.
Thank you, Emery. Next, we have Christina Rush. Christina, are you with us?
If this hadn't happened with George Floyd,
yeah. Christina Rush,
it's going to be a bigger reckoning with the country.
All right, we'll move on to the next person.
Good, John Copes.
Oh, fuck yeah. All right.
Hi, John. I'm glad you're excited. Your minute starts now.
Marianne Baldwin, your repeated failure to make timely addresses and the lie you continue to perpetuate that violence only occurred late Saturday night is disgusting. I watched your police force throw expired CS gas at a crowd of young people, the elderly, and first-time protesters with the sun still in the sky. That is violence, not a few broken windows. I find it interesting the only buildings that I witnessed riot cops protecting with their bodies on Saturday, your new employer, Barnhill, had a hand in developing. How can you claim to care about Raleigh's precious downtown businesses when your police force is more concerned with gassing innocent people and shooting them with rubber bullets than stopping those businesses from being damaged less than a block away? I hope you've been able to put together that the only protest that involved violence was also the only protest that you sicked your armed thugs on. Don't think for a second that we will let you use your useless curfew or incompetent police chief to take credit for peace brought by the people. You're a joke, Marianne. You've proven again and again being bought by developers is more important for you than listening to the needs of the people. I demand a public apology for your many shortcomings, an acknowledgement of the violence committed by RPD, and I demand your resignation. For the rest of the council, requesting a police report is not enough. They will continue to excuse away their violence the same way they made excuses for the officers who targeted a queer establishment on Sunday with no repercussion. In the words of our Lord,
Fuck the police! Fuck the police!
I thank you very much for joining us. Next, we have Paul Wojcicki.
Hi, Sage. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks so much for being here. Your minute starts now, Paul.
Thank you, Councilors Martin, Stewart, and Mountain, for allowing us to be heard tonight. I've been listening to see how you all would respond to this latest instance of police violence, and setting aside the ridiculous attempts by Mr. Buffkin to delay reports on what happened and the shockingly tone-deaf comments from Chief Deck Brown last night that all life matters. Please resign, Chief. I've heard some good things from you all. I've heard terms like structural inequity and that Black Lives Matter. But the last term really gets me, because just saying Black Lives Matters fails to acknowledge that you have to become actively anti-racist. That is, you city council members cannot say that while funding the very system that beat, cage, and murder black bodies. I acknowledge the discomfort you experience that comes with taking this role, and although I support the suggested policy changes, let me remind you that the Minnesota Police Department had policies against the very actions that killed George Floyd. Let's be clear, you city councilors have an opportunity. The city budget Mr. Hall has laid in front of you is rewarding the police and reinforcing a racist system. What are your priorities? In the midst of a projected $36 million budget shortfall and position freezes, you are giving a third of your budget.
Thank you so much, Paul. We appreciate you calling in tonight. Thank you. Next, we have Olivia Rich.
Yes, I would just like to say that the aggression and attitude shown by the RPD earlier this week was disgusting. I would also like to say that they shot upon medics and people at a gay bar trying to give people medical supplies and help. And I would also like to suggest that with the 4 demands that have been made by everyone else, I would also like to add that police should have to log 150 hours or more of community service in minority communities or Black communities. And I would also like to note that it takes more than twice as many hours to become a barber than it does a police officer, and that's over someone's haircut, not their freaking life. So also, I would like to shout out to you, Mr. Martin. I see your flag, and I see you looking sad and tired. And yeah, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Land is next.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
We can, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. Your minutes are
No. I mean, can you really hear me?
Oh, we can really.
2 years ago, when Raleigh PAC sponsored a poetry reading, I explained to you that poets are speakers of last resort when London Bridge is falling down, and we called on our poets to help you with your listening skills. But in all honesty, you haven't been paying any attention. So here we are again. It's amusing in some pathetic way that your attempt to stage citizens' participation in a meaningless review board is contrasted every night with a honest example of public dialogue we're seeing in the streets. A hard and useful discussion you have always done everything in your power to smother. Perhaps one concrete outcome of this crisis would be your postponing of your sham police review project in order to address some proposals of actual reform. Perhaps Sage and Corey, you can review local progress's police accountability scorecard to go along with your work on financing. You pray that the memory of Akil Denkin, Shaquan Terry, and Javier Torres will fade, and we'll stop saying their names.
For joining us. We appreciate you being here. Next, we have Jamie Blue. Jamie, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Your minute starts now, Jamie.
All right. In addition to what everybody else has mentioned, I would like to say that the priority of hiring of military personnel should be ended, because military training is fundamentally different than police training. This is not a war zone. This is a community. Police should be part of the community. They should not see everybody around them as the enemy. There is too much us versus them. Even the terminology of the thin blue line separates police from the people that they are trying to protect. And in closing, I'm just going to say one quote from a North Carolina resident that a lot of people should probably enjoy. When a man carries a gun all the time, the respect he thinks he's getting might really be feared. So don't carry a gun because you want the people, because you don't want the people to fear a gun. You want them to respect you.
Next, we have Michelle Jewell.
Hi, Sage. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. I'm asking the City Council for 3 actions. First, to require an investigation of all uses of tear gas by RPD for misconduct. Second, to require that the RPD accepts full liability for healthcare costs and lost wages of victims of tear gas. And third, to ban the use of all chemical weapons, especially tear gas in its unregulated explosive canister form, from the streets of Raleigh completely. A 2017 systematic review of 5,131 tear gas injuries found that 1 in 100 result in permanent disabilities, either from exposure to the chemicals or harm caused by the projectiles. Currently, there are no regulations for tear gas manufacturers, and the same review found that the volume and concentrations of chemicals varies widely. Yet tear gas is used regularly, as we saw in Raleigh this week. It's an unregulated chemical weapon that risks the lives and well-being of everyone who's exposed to it, and it ignites the very behavior it purports to discourage.
Thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne. Next, we have Donna Bailey.
Sorry, no, Suzanne Adley Warwick.
My eyes are playing tricks on me. Sorry, Michelle. Next, we have Suzanne Adley Warwick. Suzanne, are you with us?
She's connected, but not.
Okay, then let's move on to Donna, please.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks, Donna. Your minute starts now.
Thank you. Trust is something that has to be earned. In disbanding the CACs, the only community-based voice in Raleigh, you got rid of a valuable place where citizens and police got together on a regular basis to discuss important issues. It was the best place for building relationships with the police and having dialogues with other neighbors. 8 of the 18 CACs were in predominantly Black neighborhoods. These were integral parts of the Black community where larger issues could be discussed in safety. Since 40% of the CACs were in Black neighborhoods, you are silencing the very same voices who you now say you want to hear from. Why should anyone trust you? There is very little trust in the actions of this council. You will have to do much better. You can start by reinstating CACs until you have something else in place. Anything is better than nothing.
Next, we'll hear from Spencer Bland.
Hey, thank you so much for the time. Mayor Baldwin, I voted for you, and I have to say that I'm embarrassed of that vote now. You disappointed me when you endorsed racist and misogynist Mike Bloomberg. You lost me when you took a conflict of interest position with Barnhill Construction. Now I'm angry at how you've let your city down amid peaceful protests. Your lack of support for peaceful protests and a quick snap to call in a rabid police force in the form of a curfew against these protests has lost me. Where was the same action when we had a force of known racists armed to the teeth descend onto our state capitol under the guise of reopening this state? We need full-scale reform of the Raleigh Police Department, reallocating most of that $111 million into social and economic policies for our growing city, and a reopening of all disciplinary actions from the last 10 years against officers. If you care about Black lives and true reform, don't just listen, do something. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate you joining us. Next, we have Letha Muhammad.
Hey, this is Letha Muhammad. I'm a citizen of Southeast Raleigh, Corey Branches District, and I'm here tonight to lend my support to the demands that have been mentioned by other speakers tonight. I also want to lift up my disappointment and my anger of the treatment of Raleigh citizens at the protests for the last few nights. and my disdain for the curfew that has been put in place that is locking us into our homes. I also demand that Mayor Baldwin take a good hard look at the choices she's making as the leader of this city and do something different. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Letha.
Just give us a second to catch up with the list.
Bailey Baker.
Hello? We have Bailey Baker.
Hi, Bailey. Thanks so much for joining us. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Your minute starts now, Bailey.
I want to formally address Chief Jack Brown and call for her immediate resignation, as well as the firing of every police officer involved in the attacking of peaceful protesters on Sunday, May 30th at 8 p.m. and 8:55 p.m., where the use of chemical weapons and bullets were used on peaceful protesters in violation of our constitutional rights. They fired on our retreating backs as we screamed, cried, and fled. I witnessed press and young women be targeted with mace directly in the face. Jack Brown continues to lie about these events, despite overwhelming video evidence disproving her lies. She refuses to remain accountable not only for her actions, but the actions of her officers, of which she is directly responsible. I support Raleigh PAC and condemn Jack Brown for her response. Black lives do matter. I want to emphasize the fact that protesters were sitting on the ground saying, "Don't shoot," as the police shot on us with absolutely no warning.
Thank you so much for joining us, Bailey. We appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you so much, Bailey. Thank you for joining us tonight. Next, we have Karayo. Karayo, are you with us?
Not yet, I don't think. Unless, can you hear me?
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So your minute will start now.
Great, thank you. I was born in Raleigh. I've lived here my whole life. There's protesting going on right now, which is where most of the Black citizens are. I'll be joining them again after this. Yesterday, I was actively tear gassed on Fayetteville Street. The police are escalating the issue. Our police have destroyed medical camps like at Ruby Deluxe on Salisbury Street. Our police are unafraid to say out loud that they do not care, and there's overwhelming video documenting it. You, sitting in your comfortable home, you scratching your face, I've been watching you. You don't care. You're reacting only because we are getting loud. We're supposed to be coming together to get through a highly contagious lung virus, and yet every one of you have not fought the use of tear gas. Today, I have found the proposed budget for our taxes. The police need to be defunded, started with the military gear. Like in Los Angeles, check the news. It's happening right now. They've defunded it by $150 million. I'll go ahead and stop now.
Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Joseph Gallo.
What? Joey doesn't even live here. I know this guy.
Okay. Did you sign up then instead? Okay. Beth, we will move on to the next person.
Imagine your connection breaks out right when it's your turn. I would cry. I was so worried that was gonna happen to me. I was so happy. When you said it, can you hear me?
Did whoever lives with Joseph Gallo, you're on and we can hear you? Okay, Beth, let's go ahead and move on to the next speaker, please.
Will do. Let me find out.
Thank you.
We have Derek Dunn.
Hey, Derek, welcome. Your minute starts now.
Hi, thank you. I stand with Raleigh PAC and Raleigh demands justice. In support of these 5 demands, we demand the removal of Chief Jack Brown if policies below are not immediately implemented. We demand subpoena power to the proposed oversight board to strengthen their ability to effectively review and investigate grievances through RPD policy change. We propose that no new police stations are built in heavily black areas and that the multiple stations close to each other in heavily black neighborhoods are transferred. We demand a policy requiring officers to intervene when a fellow cop becomes overly abusive to a detainee and we demand an investment in community-led health and safety strategies instead of increasing investment in police. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Joseph. I appreciate your time. Next, we have Lauren Frey.
Can you hear me?
They hear you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Frey. I'm a lifelong resident of Raleigh, and I have 3 points for you all tonight. First, you must immediately ban the use of guns, tear gas, rubber bullets, and pepper spray by police officers. They are violently attacking peaceful protesters in the streets this week, and you are complicit in their violence when you pay for their weapons. Second, you must redistribute all $111 million allocated to the police in 2021 to sectors and services that are actually proven to increase community safety. We need to invest in living wages, healthcare, quality education, social workers, mental health professionals to build thriving communities, not the police. Third, these citywide curfews are clearly a racist ploy to criminalize the protests against police brutality and white supremacy. You must lift them and own up to the reality that you as a city government have actively tried to suppress the fight for justice. This has placed you on the side of white supremacy. In the curfews, defund the police, Black Lives Matter. I yield my time.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lauren. I'll give staff time to get the list up. It looks like next we have Sam Respis.
Hello?
Hey, Sam. You're with us, and your minute will start now.
1. We demand investment in community-led health and safety strategies instead of increasing investment in police. 2. We demand policy requiring officers to intervene when a fellow cop becomes overly abusive to the detainee. 3. We propose that no new police stations are built in heavily Black areas and that the multiple stations close to each other in heavily Black neighborhoods are transferred, reducing the police in the Black Raleigh communities. 4. We demand subpoena power to the proposed oversight board to strengthen their ability to effectively review and investigate grievances through an RPD policy change. And 5. We demand the removal of Chief Deck Brown if these policies are not implemented immediately. And let me use the rest of my time to say that I'm disgusted by the cowardice of all of you who have let RPD gas their own citizens and done more to defend businesses instead of standing up for their civil right to say that Black lives do matter. Horrible people. And there's not enough happiness services in the world to erase what you let them do to people. And Ruby Deluxe, and you're all horrible. Fuck you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ahmed. I appreciate you. Next we have Ahmed Amer. Are you with us?
I am. Instead of providing the people of Raleigh with a plan for how the city will move forward with addressing racial and economic injustice, Mayor Baldwin chose to strong-arm protesters into submission by imposing a curfew enforced by heavily militarized police to achieve a contentious order and a simulacrum of peace. What's the plan? Are we going to continue building a city where the language of inclusivity is rendered hollow and patronizing, where the mayor can post a picture showing a weed pen that it found in the hands of our Black brothers and sisters, which surely result in life-destroying consequences? Are we going to continue filling our prisons with Black and brown people at higher rates for petty offenses? Are we going to continue enticing developers and contractors, for whom the mayor works, by the way, with taxpayer money so they can exploit local talent and price out those who don't benefit their bottom line? The worst thing that can happen now is for the mayor's office and the city council to resume business as usual. The people of Raleigh are looking to you to use the resources of the office to eliminate injustices which seek to kill them, not exacerbate them. And I think a good starting point is a meaningful plan which includes diverting funds from policing to more just ends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Next, we have Trey Hicks. Trey, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, and your minute starts now.
All right. I think what happened to Mr. Floyd this weekend and others is a horrible thing. But I think this situation sadly shows the sense of entitlement that these people in the streets who are looting and rioting and causing destruction to this city shows. Chief Deck Brown, I support you and all of the police in Raleigh and across this country for keeping law and order in this country. I think that these people don't know how to communicate who are feeling this sense of entitlement. And this is a direct result of our city being destroyed because they don't know how to communicate, they're weak, and they don't know how to get stuff done. And all they're going to do is loot and protest, and in a few weeks, they're going to pack up because they're weak and they don't know how to get stuff done. And it's a shame. It is an absolute shame.
Thank you for joining us, Trey. I appreciate it. Next, we have Lindsay Holmes.
I'm so glad I get to follow up Trey Hicks. First of all, I'd like to say Black Lives Matter and Black Trans Lives Matter. I have spent this weekend with my fellow citizens marching across the city in order to have voices amplified of those who continue to be oppressed by those who continue to be oppressed by Raleigh RPD, as well as the systemic places of racism we have in place in our country. I was tear gassed. I had to learn how to wash out eyes of your citizens. I am going to yield the rest of my time because as a white person, we should be amplifying the voices of Black people here in Raleigh. And those Black voices are currently marching the streets instead of sitting on a phone call like the rest of you are doing. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I appreciate you. Thank you very much, Lindsay. I appreciate you calling in. The next person we have on the line is Conrad James. Conrad, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I can't breathe. I was just hitting my dab pen like Mayor Baldwin does. So my name's Conrad James. I'm the founder of Living Ultraviolet. We're a nonprofit think tank based out of NC State University.
Beth, can we please pause this time? Conrad, it's incredibly hard to hear you. I don't know if you're using a microphone or if you can speak up, but it's nearly impossible to hear you. Can you try again?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, hold on, wait. Is that better?
No.
Okay.
One more time.
That's about it. That's the only thing I can do right here.
There we go. That's good. Do
All
that,
right.
and we'll start your time over right now.
No problem. So my name's Conrad James. I'm the founder of Living Ultraviolet. We're a nonprofit think tank based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, that stands up for underserved communities. Right now, what we're doing is forcing demands that need to be met in order to meet the same type of demands that happened at Geneva Convention. And doing that, which you guys committed an act of war, a war crime. So with that, a bunch of journalists out in California also had acts of war placed upon them, and they filed a class action lawsuit. So this is the first time that we are going to notify you guys of the class action lawsuit that all the protesters will have at your door tomorrow. Because the city attorney needs to defend the war crimes that was voted upon by the city council. And then
Thank you so much for joining us, Conrad. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry about the technical difficulties in the beginning.
No problem.
Have a good night. Next, we have Lisa Angel. Lisa, are you there? Awesome. We can hear you, and your minute starts now.
Okay, great. I have lived in Raleigh since the early 1970s, and before Sunday, May 31st, I generally had faith and trust in the Raleigh Police Department. I see now that that was naive. That trust was completely shattered when I watched non-violent protesters be repeatedly assaulted with tear gas. I was and am completely horrified. While we are all facing a possible deadly respiratory disease, our police sent harmful gas to the lungs of the citizens it promised to serve. There were so many other options. Clearly, the police were trained to use violence first. Why was riot gear and chemical-filled gas the first option before a request to move? Or instead of the protection and facilitation of the protest in the way that the Durham police seem to be able to do. I would like to know how much money was spent Sunday night on tear gas canisters and riot gear. Why was the bus system allowed to be used to move the police around town? Who authorized it? There are so many opportunities for de-escalation Sunday night. We need to use this time to examine what other options.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have Blythe Geiger.
Police special interest money must be removed from the political process. A document compiled by a private citizen listed 3 Raleigh City Council people as having accepted $1,000 donations from the Southern States Police Benevolent Association PAC. These council members include Patrick Buffkin, Sage Martin, and David Cox. In the last few weeks, in New York City, politicians, including assemblywomen, city council people, and state senators, have returned and redistributed over $29,000 in campaign contributions from police PAC. I am asking these 3 Raleigh City Council people to answer the following questions. Have they accepted these donations from the Southern States Police Benevolent Association? Are they willing to redistribute their $1,000 contributions?
Press 1 to be connected to your meeting.
Next, we have Jeremy Roca.
Can you hear me?
Maybe. Yep, there you are.
Okay, thank you much. Jeremy Roca from down. Hindsight is 2020.
Jeremy, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. You're breaking up. And you're good. Go ahead, and your minute starts now.
My name is Jeremy Roca from downtown Raleigh, and hindsight is always 2020. And were there lapse of judgment and mistakes made? Absolutely. But I think that any decision and action from our mayor or the police chief would create controversy. And in these painful times, we want to point fingers and blame each other and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. And I may be wrong with this statement, but I cannot think of a city who responded correctly to chaos, to violent chaos of the previous days. I want to call for us to consider that we cannot be divided in our effort to uproot the evil of racism. And I want to believe that all of you in council are people of justice. I am calling, though, for us to lead in amending the NC Constitution and placing Confederate statues not in a place of honor in downtown Raleigh, and collaborating with Wake commissioners to rename the middle school. I continue to support the good work that you do and know of my prayers as you continue to govern us. And Mayor, keep smoking.
Thank you for joining us, Jeremy. We appreciate it. Your minute is up. Before we move on to Doug Pluta, I'm being reminded to let people know that we are moving through the list in the order by which you registered today. So for people that are asking online in the chat box, I want to let people know that that is the order by which we're moving forward. Great. So Doug Pluta, you are next.
Hi there. So just a quick reminder for everybody on council, you guys are on video, so we can see how disinterested and not connected some of you are. As a college student doing these video meetings, I can tell some of you are on your phones doing other things, so maybe you should try a little better there. Next, Mayor Baldwin, you should definitely resign. Your inaction on Saturday during the protest while your city was burning was disgusting, and we've seen you once in public since then. If that's all you got for us while your city's burning and while your police are tear gassing innocent people, leave. That's about it. And we can't have a discussion about police reform without discussing the police chief. But apparently city council is bound by some code of conduct to not discuss the police chief. This is an important time in our history. And if the city council is too afraid of censure or whatever to discuss the police chief, then you're all cowards and you should not. Don't be afraid of the consequences. Talk.
Thank you so much for joining us. Your minute is up. Next, we have Jonathan Edwards.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
We most certainly can, and your minute starts right about now.
Wonderful, thank you. So I was there Sunday afternoon at the Capitol building. I was gassed by the cops without warning or communication. Whatever EMS vehicle they were trying to let through was completely silent. They'd never asked us to move or anything like that. They broke out tear gas immediately. I was chased down by Centennial Mall by riot-geared troopers using over intimidation tactics. And I guess what I want to ask the council is, where were you? Come out to the protests, talk to us, hear us, put your feet on the ground. What are you waiting for? What are you afraid of? As far as accountability goes for police officers, liability insurance, please. Doctors take our lives into their hands every day. Police officers do as well. So why do we have to pay out whenever they mess up? And also, I'm not a member of Raleigh PAC, but subpoena power for the oversight board is a no-brainer. Anything less is toothless. Anything less is condescension. Also, I want the police department to refuse DoD equipment and instead use your immense reserves of money for empathy testing and training. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Next, we have Reed Pegram. Reed, are you with us?
Right. Yes. I'm sorry.
Beth, let's go ahead and restart his time, please.
Hello? Okay. On May 1st,
Blue Igloo, a group tied to anarchist and white supremacy causes demonstrated while armed outside Oakwood Cemetery in violation of North Carolina General Statute 14277.2. Possession of a weapon at a demonstration less than a mile from my home. This group came back to our city each of the following Saturdays, cumulatively costing over $67,000 in law enforcement agencies. When Blue Igloo returned May 9th, I dressed up like Batman and made a sign reading "Guns killed my parents" to show Blue Igloo that Raleigh citizens can cosplay too. Blue Igloo occupied our subway and brought national attention thanks to an inert rocket launcher. Every Saturday, I saw Raleigh police reportedly coach Blue Igloo on how to avoid any arrest or prosecution. My friend Alan Williams was arrested every...
Thank you for joining us tonight, Reed. Your minute is up. Next, we will hear from Colton Flick. Colton,
hey,
are you with
can you hear me?
We can. Your minute starts now.
In 2017, the Raleigh Police Protectorate Association made up and doubled down on a racist lie that got a black man fired from his job. They didn't even apologize when they admitted it was all a lie. Why didn't that prompt change? Earlier this year, Mayor Baldwin publicly endorsed a racist authoritarian who pioneered stop and frisk for the presidency of the United States. Why was that okay? Why is our Confederate cemetery immaculately kept while across town on Oberlin Road, a black cemetery that is just as old and just as historically significant sits abandoned and falls into disrepair? Why in the year 2020 is there a monument outside our Capitol building dedicated to our Confederate dead when there's plenty of room for it in the History Museum right across the street? The people protesting know the answers to those questions, and I think you do too. If you don't, it's time to resign, because it's clear that you're not interested in serving all of your constituents. We need broad-scale change. If you deploy an organization meant to handle crimes in progress to watch over a protest, it can't surprise you when they treat a protest like a crime in progress. We need to reallocate funding and responsibility from the police and other organizations to organizations that can support our community and keep it safe. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time, Colton. I'll give staff a minute to get the next caller set up.